Hello everyone, and welcome to After Alexander. Episode 109, the 6th Syrian War. Here we are again, 6th time's the charm. We finished our last episode with Egypt, under the two regents of the young Ptolemy VI, attacking Hollow Syria in 170 BCE. Let's see whether the 6th Syrian War is going to be any more decisive or conclusive than the last 5. Word of warning, it's probably not going to be the end of the question. Antiochus V assembled a grand force for the purpose of attacking Egypt. At this point, he did something we've seen time and time again. He made his young son, Prince Antiochus, co-king with himself. This boy is more often referred to as Antiochus V in the history books, but with our chronology and numbering system, this child is Antiochus VI. Edwin Bevan tells us he is 3 or 4 years old when his elevation happens, but given our chronology, he's probably around 2. Then again, his birth date is only approximate, so he might have been born in 173 or 4 rather than 172, to fit with Bevan's timeline. Still, I'm sticking with the date that we have. Bevan tells us that, based on this elevation of his son, Antiochus V was planning to be away from Antioch for quite some time, which is a pattern we've seen constantly with our Seleucid monarchs throughout our story. Antiochus V headed south through the deserts towards Egypt itself. He was almost at the forts on the border between Hollow Syria and Egypt when he encountered the armies of the Egyptian regents past Mount Casius. They fought a battle near this mountain and the city of Pelusium. This battle, which I haven't seen a name for, so I'm going to call it the Battle of Mount Casius, was a resounding defeat for Egypt. This sent Alexandria into hysterics. They still held Pelusium, but the prevailing sentiment at the capital was that everything was now done for. Ptolemy VI was bundled into a boat to flee to the island of Samothrace. However, this precaution actually proved to be his undoing. The ship was captured, and the young king was delivered into the captivity of his uncle, Antiochus V. Now, you can imagine that their king being a captive would make Egypt pretty much helpless to whatever demands the Seleucids wanted or cared to make, and the people of Alexandria thought the same thing. So they elevated Ptolemy VI, the younger brother, to power. Edwin Bevan tells us that Ptolemy the Younger, or Ptolemy VIII as history calls him, was about 15 at the time, which matches with our birth date of around 186 BCE. Note it only roughly matches, as this would make him around 16 or 17 or so. Still, these birth dates are always approximate, in my experience. He was given the epithet of Euergetes, which Ptolemy III had once had, in an attempt to harken back to the Ptolemaic glory days. Incidentally, I'm going to keep referring to him as Ptolemy VIII, as the history books do, because, well, I'm showing the story from the Seleucid perspective, and Ptolemaic inconsistencies are neither here nor there. This elevation of a rival monarch played right into Antiochus's hands. He now set himself up as the legitimate protector of his nephew Ptolemy VI and his rights. So he now had an excuse to invade. By the way, just like Seleucus I had once had, which I for one think is poetic. Now this pretext is all well and good, but Antiochus still had the obstacle of Pelusium to deal with. The Egyptian government for its part sent a navy to reinforce the city. So, the Seleucid fleet engaged it, defeating them just as the land army had defeated its Egyptian equivalent. It wasn't just military victory, however. Antiochus did have some more subtle tactics up his sleeve. When they had first fought close to Mount Casius, hence why I'm calling the battle this instead of the Battle of Pelusium, Antiochus had ordered his troops to hold their fire when the Egyptians were about to be routed, in an attempt to win over the hearts and minds of the Egyptian forces. He appeared, as a result, as a merciful ruler to them, so a lot of the soldiers had already defected to Antiochus. Antiochus used this goodwill to get the garrison at Pelusium to turn and let him into the city. Egypt was now ripe for the plucking. The Seleucid forces made a bridge over the section of the Nile that Pelusium adjoined onto, and rushed into the Delta region. Before long, all of Lower Egypt, except Alexandria, was Antiochus's to command. Alexandria itself still held out for the boy history remembers as Ptolemy VIII. Still, Antiochus installed a rival government, with Ptolemy VI as his puppet, at the city of Memphis. Over in Alexandria, meanwhile, Ptolemy VIII married his sister Cleopatra II, whom her existing brother-husband had left behind when fleeing the city. And yes, I can't remember if we addressed it at the time, but Ptolemy VI is married, or was at least from Ptolemy VIII's perspective, to his sister Cleopatra II. Very much taking after family tradition on both sides there. Ptolemy VIII, for his part, was pretty much the face of Egypt to foreign powers according to Bevan, as Memphis was cut off from the rest of the Mediterranean world. In the meantime, Alexandria was reinforced for the inevitable attack Antiochus V would bring to bear, and sure enough, he pressed towards it. Envoys from foreign nations came to Antiochus as mediators on behalf of the Alexandrian government. They stated that, yes, it was accepted, now they thought about it, that Egypt had been at fault for the beginning of the fighting, but it had been the faction of Euaeus and Linnaeus who had been to blame, and they were now gone. They begged Antiochus not to punish his nephew Ptolemy VI for the minister's mistakes. Antiochus agreed with the general sentiment, and then pushed for Hollow Syria to remain Seleucid. For their part, the Egyptian envoys felt that this was by now an old issue. Hollow Syria had been resoundingly declared Seleucid by the defeat, they thought amongst themselves, and now it was Egyptian independence itself that was at stake. They tried to discuss this with Antiochus, but the king wove diplomatic webs around them that basically meant he didn't tell them everything. In the world of fiction, it reminds me a lot of a representative of the Galactic Empire in Asimov's Foundation, with all his statements essentially cancelling each other out until they mean nothing. No doubt Lord Dorwyn was playing from the Seleucid playbook thousands of years earlier. Anyway, fictional parallels aside, Antiochus travelled down the Delta showering Greek citizens with money, and all the while remained ominously silent regarding diplomatic matters. Our favourite early 20th century source Bevan is of the opinion that Antiochus wanted Ptolemy VI to be recognised as uncontested king. Alexandria refused, as they could only really do, and so a siege began. This news upset the people of Rhodes, and they put forward an embassy begging Antiochus to stop attacking the Egyptian king. Now, importantly, they meant Ptolemy VIII, but Antiochus protested that he and the Egyptian king, meaning Ptolemy VI, not the VIII, were allied and good friends. If Alexandria would only accept their true sovereign, that would be the end of the matter. Alexandria's state grew desperate, and soon they appealed to Rome. The Roman Republic could only really send envoys while they were bogged down with Macedon. Now, we don't know whether the Alexandrians made this appearance of Roman envoys seem more severe than it was to Antiochus, but he abruptly lifted his siege and left Egypt altogether in the late stages of autumn in 169 BCE. He may have left Egypt warring between two brothers, but to me, this sudden withdrawal is truly baffling. You almost had everything that you've been fighting for the past 5 Syrian Wars. The Roman historian Livy, in Book 49, Section 19 of his Histories, tells us that the Roman delegation warned that the party who continued fighting would be seen as an enemy of Rome. Perhaps Antiochus was either scared of the Romans or wanted to use them against Egypt by insinuating that they were the ones who were still fighting, not he, so Rome could go after Egypt for all he cared. Or else he just remembered the trouncing his father had gotten decades earlier. I will say, to add a somewhat sweeter note to this rather bitter taste of abandoning Egypt, he did keep soldiers in Pelusium to ensure he still had a way into the country in future. Despite how it may seem, the war is in fact still ongoing, but we will leave it there for now. We leave Egypt embroiled in civil war, and Antiochus V making some seemingly terrible decisions. That brings us, on a rather disappointing note, to the end of today's episode. As always, thank you all for listening. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to get in touch at the show's email address. And until next time, have a great week, everyone.